Layla James had always dreamed of working in a prestigious, five-star hotel. As a young girl, she had been fascinated by the world of hospitality, the elegance, the fine dining, the beautiful rooms, and most of all, the people. There was something about the way the staff carried themselves, the way they interacted with the guests, that made Layla want to be a part of it. It wasn't just the luxury or the attention to detail that drew her in, it was the opportunity to connect with people from all walks of life, to offer them an unforgettable experience. She had spent years working her way up through different hotels, from small, budget-friendly places to more mid-range establishments. Along the way, she encountered all kinds of challenges, from rude guests to difficult colleagues. But nothing had prepared her for the reality of working at the Althea. The Althea was the epitome of luxury. Situated in the heart of the city, it was one of the most well-known hotels, attracting elite clientele from across the globe. The rooms were extravagant, the service impeccable, and the atmosphere both welcoming and exclusive. The hotel prided itself on its outstanding standards, and the staff was expected to maintain those standards at all costs. But for Layla, it wasn't just about meeting the expectations, it was about breaking barriers and proving that she belonged in this world. She wasn't just here to be a part of the system, she was here to change it, to show that someone like her could thrive in a space that had historically been dominated by people who didn't look like her. From the moment she walked into the Althea for her first day, Layla felt an uncomfortable shift in the air. The grandeur of the lobby, the polished marble floors, the shining chandeliers, everything looked perfect. Yet, it was impossible to ignore the subtle but undeniable tension in the air. The staff looked at her with a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and, in some cases, outright disdain. Layla had always been prepared to work hard for what she wanted, but the coldness she experienced from her colleagues was new. They weren't just dismissive, they were actively ignoring her. The whispers behind her back, the side glances when she walked into a room, it was as though she was invisible, a ghost in a world where only those deemed worthy were seen. She had worked in hotels before, in places where she had been one of the few black employees. She had faced prejudice, but nothing like this. Here, it wasn't just that she was being treated differently, it was that her very presence seemed to disturb something deeply ingrained in the culture of the hotel. She could feel it in the way the senior staff members looked at her as if she were a challenge to their authority. They didn't just dismiss her because of her experience, they dismissed her because of who she was. Her supervisor, John Harris, was the first person to make his opinion clear. He was in his mid-40s, with a commanding presence and a reputation for being ruthless when it came to hotel standards. His eyes missed nothing, and his cold, clinical approach to management left no room for error. From the moment Layla was introduced to him, he made it clear that he expected perfection. "Here, you're either exceptional or you're invisible," he told her, his gaze sharp and unforgiving. "If you can't keep up with the standards of this hotel, you won't last long." Layla stood tall, determined not to let him see how his words affected her. She had worked in the industry long enough to know that her professionalism, her hard work, and her passion for service would speak for itself. But as the days passed, she found herself sinking deeper into a sense of isolation. Despite her best efforts, she was being kept at arm's length by the other employees. The whispers in the break rooms, the coldness in the hallways, it was as if she were an outsider, never quite allowed to be a part of the team. Layla tried to shrug it off. After all, she had been hired for her skills, not for the color of her skin. But no matter how many times she told herself this, it didn't make the isolation any easier to bear. One night, after a particularly draining day, Layla was cleaning up in the break room when Nina, a fellow employee who had been at the Althea for several years, came in. Nina had a warm smile, but even she seemed to hold back when it came to Layla. "Hey," Nina said quietly, leaning against the counter. "I know this isn't easy. It's not just you, by the way. A lot of us get the cold shoulder around here when we start. They don't like change." Layla frowned. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, not sure she understood what Nina was hinting at. "I mean that this place has a way of making you feel like you don't belong, especially if you're different. You're black, you're new, and let's face it, you're not what they expect. It's not personal, it's just how things are. People like Harris, the senior staff, they want everything to stay the same, and they see people like you as a challenge. Layla's heart sank. She had known this was coming, but hearing it from Nina, someone who had been there for so long, made it feel real. So, what am I supposed to do? Just keep working and hope it gets better. Nina looked at her with understanding. You've got to show them who you are. Keep your head up, keep working hard. They'll either get with the program, or they won't. But don't let them break you. Despite Nina's words, things didn't improve for Layla. John Harris continued to criticize her work, often in front of her colleagues. He pointed out every small mistake, no matter how trivial, while other employees who made similar mistakes were given more leniency. It seemed like there was always something wrong with her performance, something that kept her from meeting the high standards of the Althea. Layla began to feel like nothing she did was ever going to be good enough. And then there were the guests, the elite clients who had the power to make or break the reputation of the hotel. Many of them didn't hesitate to make racially charged comments, treating her as though she were invisible, or worse, as though she were somehow inferior. One guest, Mr. Johnson, a regular at the Althea, made it clear that he didn't want to be served by a black woman. He said it loud enough for everyone to hear, and Layla could feel the weight of his words sink deep into her chest. She tried to smile and continue doing her job, but it was hard. So hard. She had heard things like this before, but this time it felt different. This time, it wasn't just a passing comment, it was a reminder that, despite her talent, despite everything she had worked for, she would always be judged by the color of her skin first. The moment everything changed came when Thomas Edwards, the founder of the hotel chain, arrived at the Althea. Layla had no idea who he was when he first walked in, but something about him felt different. He wasn't like the other guests. He moved with purpose, and his presence commanded attention without being brash. He wasn't there just for a stay, he was there for an inspection. Layla had no idea that he was, in fact, the very person who owned the hotel, the person with the power to change everything. Their first interaction was brief but impactful. Thomas Edwards was immediately struck by her professionalism, and as they spoke, he could tell that there was something special about her. She wasn't just a hotel employee, she was someone who cared about the job, who cared about the people. It was obvious to him that she wasn't being treated fairly, but it wasn't until he overheard a conversation between John Harris and other senior staff members that he realized just how bad things were. They were talking about Layla, saying things like, "She's not cut out for this job and shall never make it here." That was when Thomas made his move. He called Layla into his office and, for the first time since she started at the Althea, she felt like she mattered. "Layla," he said with a reassuring smile, "I've been watching you and I know how hard you've been working. I also know what's been happening here. I want you to know that I see your potential. You're going to do great things. But more than that, I want to make sure you have the support you need." The next day, Thomas made an announcement to the entire hotel staff. In a meeting that felt like a turning point, he addressed the elephant in the room, the toxic culture that had been allowed to fester for so long. "I've seen what's been happening here," Thomas said, his voice carrying through the room. "This hotel should be a place of inclusivity where every person, no matter their background, can thrive. We are going to change that. And it starts today." From that moment on, things started to shift. John Harris and several senior managers were investigated for their discriminatory practices. Layla, who had been overlooked for so long, was appointed to a leadership role in the hotel's diversity and inclusion program. Thomas Edwards' intervention wasn't just a turning point for Layla, it was a turning point for the entire hotel. The changes that followed were swift and far-reaching. Diversity training became mandatory for all employees, and the hotel's culture began to evolve. The toxic atmosphere that had once made Layla feel invisible slowly faded, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. Layla had earned her place not just as an employee, but as a leader. She had proven that she could overcome the challenges that had been set before her, and now she was determined to help others do the same. Layla's journey at the Althea wasn't just about personal success, it was about changing the culture for everyone, ensuring that no one would have to endure the kind of prejudice she had faced.